Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the invitation to come along to speak to you today. Michelle set an interesting challenge there. We didn't coordinate, and I think you'll see probably some of these are a slightly different take on probably the same issue, I'd say. So let's see how it goes.
Makes it more fun.
Indeed, exactly. More debate in a minute. Just a couple of slides first, bit of context in a way, just setting out the challenges that we're facing at the moment. They're good challenges, one of unprecedented growth over the last number of years. Big stations we're dealing with, the numbers always sort of worth noting in terms of bigger than Heathrow Airport, etc., etc. We quote that quite regularly. But the network is pretty much close to full in many areas. It's sort of picking up the theme that Michelle alluded to, definitely in and around London and the South East. It's a big old challenge to manage that day in, day out. The last point there is quite important to us in terms of it's about trade-offs now in many cases. Performance is increasingly difficult to deliver day in, day out, and that's in a time when passengers are probably expecting better and better performance day in, day out. And indeed, the subject matter we're talking about here, people need, as Michael said, good reliability in their journeys to airports. So it's that challenge that's quite tricky. But, again, as Michelle's mentioned, we're doing quite a lot about it. So we've got a big programme of work in Control Period 5, our 2014 to 19 control period. Finishing off the likes of Thameslink, Crossrail, Reading, Great Western Electrification, big pieces of work. And again, the fourth bullet there is pretty significant. Crossrail and Thameslink, both on corridors with Gatwick and Heathrow on them, our big airports on them. So they do a lot for those airports in terms of improving the quality of service, the quantity of service, and hopefully the reliability of service as well. The timing of the Airports Commission work is a bit challenging to us, but it's actually very good and handy timing. We're doing a lot of work at the moment on the planning for the rail industry, with the rail industry for the next 30 years. We go through a process, people will probably be aware, in terms of reutilisation strategies we've done in the past, looking at medium long-term planning. We're now going into another sort of realm of that in terms of route studies. We've just sort of moved the goalposts a little bit in terms of broadening out the scope, trying to look a little bit more imaginative at these things rather than just extrapolation of existing demand. So the Airports Commission work in that context is really significant for us, and why we've been engaging with the Commission and all the proposers. Because it can make a big difference in some senses what scenarios we look at, what options we look at. And that's where we've been approaching it, working with everybody to try and understand, depending on what the Airports Commission eventually go for, pitch for, what different scenarios that gives us with each of those route studies. But the timing is really handy, it's just a little bit interesting to juggle it. A little bit of context of the routes then. Just got a couple of graphs that have plucked out the route study work to date. So that's looking at the Brighton Main Line. The big blip, we've got the capacity line at the top there, the blue line, including bear in mind that's seated and standing capacity. So it's always been a challenge that we're already suggesting at the point in terms of supply now. We've got massively more demand, including cramming poor passengers on the trains than we're supplying. But things like that step change there are driven by Thameslink. That's why it's so significant to us, the industry, that the outputs and improvement in outputs that's going to deliver. But we're trying to look out here somewhere. This range is always a little bit misleading because it's about how people load the individual trains. So you never assume that you get towards 100% capacity because you've got a significant proportion of your train service full and standing by then. There will be a few trains that aren't fully loaded. So you're always looking at much lower than that in terms of the effective capacity provided. And that does show we need significant continued investment. So there is a consistent theme here with Michelle. Depends a little bit how you look at it, because some of the stats I'll say in a minute is you need that investment anyway. But you don't certainly need it. But these routes, we have plans for developing that. More on that in a second. This is a Great Western route as well. Showing one of significant growth. This is what Crossrail and ultimately HS2 is predicted to drive in terms of growth. So again, there's capacity there at the moment. There will be capacity there in the future. But again, as Michelle said, it fills up, and it fills up relatively quickly and sort of remorselessly, which is good news for the industry, but a continued challenge. And of course, both the airports we're talking about, I'll come back to the estuary in a minute, are on that corridor. A few facts there then. The headline for me at the top there, in a sense, particularly the three core proposals, aren't really game changers. Depends a little bit how you look at it, Michelle's point, but our hypothesis, the second point there, is quite important. When you're looking at the morning peak, which is a point that we almost always orientate all our capacity towards because that's the highest demand point, it represents a relatively small percentage of usage on the infrastructure. Again, a variety of ways of looking at that. These people are often carrying cases, etc., so they take up a fair amount of space. The way they behave, the way they interact with the commuter passengers is a relevant point in terms of how they actually affect that utilisation of capacity. But on the face of it, it's a relatively small percentage. The bottom point comes in, I'll jump around a little, but as Michelle said in a sense, they do provide an awful lot of demand for usage of the rail network outside of that period, which is very, very important too. So we recognise the criticality of that. It's very important to use that space. It's all part of the improving the efficiency of the rail delivery type debate, and it's an important market sector, so we shouldn't forget that. When we think about the morning peak period, maybe not quite so significant. Third point there, possibly one for debate later, but quite important for us, is how the mix of services operate. Sensitive subject in a sense, but there's no doubt that when you have a greater mix of services on a corridor, you're using more capacity and it's probably suboptimally operating things. It gets harder to run the timetable, deliver the performance people expect, and you're using up significant chunks of capacity. So there's something there about choices going forwards. You can probably invest more money to accommodate both. That's one way of doing it, or you can change the pattern of service, and how you integrate that service pattern for the airports, for other passengers and rail users is quite significant. Extending that point a little further though, we clearly recognise the criticality of certain of those product offers for airport passengers. Service quality is one that's discussed a lot, and I know decisions have been taken. The obvious one is not favouring anything but Brighton Main Line decision to put the 442s on there. Didn't seem to be a particularly ideal solution for providing a good quality service for airport passengers. So things like that are clearly relevant. Journey time, a point we probably again maybe should discuss later. How critical is that? I think for me again it's the point Michael made. It's that reliability and regularity of service and regularity in terms of journey planning that's probably as if not more critical to the passengers than necessarily a specific journey time. But they're all parts of the product offer. The overall capacity, how it integrates with the passengers on the trains already when they get to the airport, and how that interacts when you're arriving at the airport, and that connectivity issue in terms of providing a good quality, well-connected airport offer, service offer is critical too. So it is all about balancing those factors. Got a few quick slides now we've just drawn up, and we've been working very closely with the proposers. Hopefully this is setting some of the context for what you'll hear in a minute, so I'll try to avoid going into too much detail. But back to the point that the three shortlisted options, and I'll put the estuary to one side because we haven't done a huge amount of work on that, is that they fit in quite well with the way the infrastructure is developing at the moment and how we predict it needs to develop in the future. So bear in mind the facts we're saying about the percentage of passengers that it takes up, that the airport demand takes up at the peak time. You need a lot of this investment anyway, so there is a recurring theme there. Depends a little bit how you look at it, which is Michelle's point, but you need that continuing investment on those corridors, there's no doubt about it. But that investment, so the way that the strategic direction of both the western route here that we'll see and the Brighton Main Line in a minute is heading in the same direction as improving the quality of service to the airports. There's no doubt about that. So we've got schemes, already we know where HS2 fits in, Old Oak Common, how that's developing. Crossrail provides fantastic connectivity, there's no doubt that's a step change coming fairly soon. Talking about connections into the West Coast Main Line, West London Line, great north-south connectivity options there. Southern Access has been around for a while, we keep trying on that one, we'll hopefully get there at some point. Western Access, so you're getting much better connectivity to the west, and then possibly even discussions about how you integrate that with services up towards Oxford and beyond. So the options there for fantastic cross, south, east and north connectivity for Heathrow, there's no doubt that's the case. Obviously put in here the hub proposals. They're quite different, and I think looking at it, not necessarily negatively, but a negative perception is it is different than the strategic direction at the moment, there's no doubt about it. Certain discussions about how you interact with stops at Old Oak Common and at the hub, that's potentially going against the direction of travel because you're increasing the number of stops, you're slowing down the journey time. But you can change that balance. It's not earth-shattering in a sense to just make a change of direction. But there's no doubt it is inconsistent with the way we're heading at the moment. But that's really only around how you use the network. It's developing in broadly the same pattern. Obviously, the key point is it wouldn't need Western Access, so that's one thing that you'll no doubt hear in a moment. Gatwick, similar set of issues in a way. Thameslink got a step change coming, same time scale, 2018-19, the service improves tremendously. We're doing the work at Red Hill, getting better connectivity off to the west as well. One that's always fascinated me is connectivity to the east has never seemed to really take off. And there is a statistic in there about how passengers want to use these services. Apparently the demand didn't vary much between when there was a direct service to when there was a changing service. So people want to catch that service. Now, is it that demand is low anyway? That might be it. We need to do something about improving the attractiveness. Or maybe the demand wasn't going to change much from that, and people don't mind whether they change or they've got direct service. But that's why it's always a dotted line across there. But it's step change coming. We know what we need to do. 2019, 2024, there's a lot of investment proposed for the Brighton Main Line. It's providing additional capacity. Again, the debate about how you use that to serve the airport and serve the commuters is critical. Then so one side about the Estuary Airport. We haven't worked on this much. We've been focusing on the 3 shortlisted options and providing a little bit of advice on thoughts to the Airports Commission on the Estuary option. The headline to me is that probably is a game changer. Michelle's points are right in a sense in terms of lots of investments required there too. Perhaps it's required elsewhere as well. But this one is at the moment against the direction of travel. There's a busy network it would have to integrate with, so therefore it would require that investment to accommodate the additional demand. The positive out of it, in a sense, is you would see a very high public transport mode share. No doubt, it has to be because of its location. So that's also part of the challenge, because you have to integrate that very high public transport mode share into an existing network that's already very, very busy. So the challenges for us, they're probably a step up further again. We haven't looked at it in great detail. Again, it's trying to understand what the scenarios are. That, I think, is it from me. Hopefully, it's a bit of context.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks.